Around the year 1515, an anonymous Frenchman wrote a short book which was eventually published as The Art of Archery. The author was an archer who had grown ill, and he wanted to preserve knowledge which had not yet been committed to writing. One slightly odd method that the French author describes is his manner of drawing the bow. He describes what is essentially the classic split finger form of the three finger Mediterranean release, with the arrow held between the index and middle fingers. But instead of the typical modern practice of holding the string on or around the distal joint of all three fingers, the author advises that one must hold the string on the second joint of the first finger and on the first joint of the third. There are two possible ways to interpret this passage. One has the lower finger hooked more deeply, the other has the index finger hooked more deeply. In my opinion, the deeply hooked index finger method is more likely to have been what the author intended, in part because it offers some interesting practical advantages, but also because this method of drawing the bow is not restricted to late medieval Europe. In fact, it appears to be practiced among some tribal hunter-gatherer societies that still rely on archery to survive. Two significant examples are the Jarowa tribe from the Andaman Islands and the Hadza people of Tanzania. In footage of both Jarowa and Hadza archers, one can clearly see that the string is frequently, though admittedly not always, borne more deeply upon the middle joint of the index finger, while the other fingers hold it more shallow. This and the aggressive, often dynamic shooting posture are strikingly reminiscent of medieval European archery. The deeply hooked index finger may be one possible solution to a common issue that many novice archers experience, in which the arrow tends to swing away from the bow at partial draw. Normally, this instability is resolved simply by reducing unnecessary tension in the draw hand, but the French Jarowa or Hadza draw provides an additional complementary solution. The downward angle of the index finger puts a slight sideways pressure on the back end of the arrow. This slightly rotates the front end against the handle, making it nearly impossible for the arrow to swing outwards. The bow can even be shot upside down. As an aside, this phenomenon also strongly supports the idea that for the anonymous medieval French author, the arrow was placed on the left side of the bow, which, not surprisingly, is also exactly how it is done for virtually all tribal archers that use a Mediterranean draw. Interestingly, the author also mentions how the archer should poise his bow on the thumb of the hand with which he holds it when he shoots. This is another common practice among some tribal groups, and it is also seen in some historical artwork. Again, this would seem to strongly support left side arrow placement, as only the archer's knuckle is available to serve as an arrow rest. The capturing action of the deeply hooked index finger is somewhat similar to the way the thumb draw securely holds the arrow against the bow, and I've seen many instances of modern horse archers using a similar angled or twisted Mediterranean draw to help with arrow stability on a galloping horse. In fact, I have used it myself in this manner, but I will add a significant caveat to this. In my experience with horseback archery so far, the biggest factor in arrow stability is the archer's riding ability. Putting weight in the stirrups and getting it off the horse's back helps make for a much smoother ride, to the point where you almost don't have to do anything to keep the arrow stable. So, while I have used a deeply hooked index finger in some circumstances, at present I find it completely unnecessary. It's worth noting that there is a separate medieval French manual, the Book of King Modus, that specifically deals with bow hunting from horseback. Sometimes the archers are described as shooting while stationary, and at other times they shot at prey while in motion. But while the archers are told to draw to the ear with three fingers, there is no mention of any modified Mediterranean draw. We'll never know if the release described in The Art of Archery was a commonplace practice, or merely an eccentric preference of the anonymous author. To the eyes of a modern archer, it may seem a bit unusual, but as the modern examples of the Hadza and Jarowa illustrate, it was likely a simple and robust technique. And at the end of the day, that is the essence of practical, real-world archery.